I guess this all started over the last, I don't know, many years. I developed a sensitivity to cane sugar. I would kind of get bloating, and it was uncomfortable for me. And I realized that that's sucrose, essentially, the same kind of sugar that's found in maple sugar. But I could still eat things that had honey or fructose in actual fruit. I decided to look on the internet for some desserts that I might be able to make which didn't have cane sugar in them. And I found a recipe on a thing called allrecipes.com called Hasty Chocolate Pudding, which you can make in the microwave, but it had 1/4 cup of sugar in it. So I decided to try and make it without any sugar in it just to see what would happen. And it wasn't bad, but it was, it was kind of bland. It wasn't awful. But then I decided to experiment with different other sweeteners, and I put some honey, and I put some stevia, and I came up with the following recipe. So I'm going to show you how I do it here in this kitchen. Alright, now this recipe involves cocoa powder, and I'm still wearing white pants, and instead of changing, I'm just going to put an apron on so I don't get any of it on me, because once you get cocoa powder on you, it's pretty hard to get it out. So here we go. So here's the utensils that I use. A microwavable bowl. This is one of a set of 3. It's a medium-sized bowl. A whisk. I have a nice small one. It's not too hard to use. This is a 1/3 cup measuring cup. And a couple of sets of measuring spoons. And I have a 2-cup liquid measuring cup. A wooden spoon. And that's pretty much the utensils that you need. And also, of course, a microwave oven. And I use whole milk. I get this from a local store. There's a local dairy that has it in bottles, so that's really good. I don't have to throw anything away. When I use up the milk, I can take them back. It's a deposit thing. This is actually, you could use any kind of cornstarch you want. This is not actually argo in here. It's a organic type that I bought, but I put it in this because it's easier to work with the spoons against the top instead of the little box that it came in. And I'm using Equal Exchange cocoa. It's pretty intense cocoa flavor, so I modified the recipe a little bit from what it showed on the internet. This honey, you could use pretty much any honey. Probably clover honey would be a little bit better because it doesn't put as much flavor in, but any honey works pretty well. It was surprising to me. And I also put stevia in it. This is one brand that I happen to have, which is a liquid. I just put it in by the drop. And those things go in before the pudding is cooked in the microwave. And then after it comes out, I put a couple of teaspoons of vanilla in. And I like to add chopped walnuts. For the pudding purists, you won't want to do that, but I do that because I like to have some crunch in it. And I have a little cutting board and knife here so I can chop the walnuts up. I buy them at Fistacci's down in Watertown, fresh whole walnuts. They taste better that way. And then I cut them just before I put them in because they stay fresher when they're whole. So let's get started. First I'm going to put in, it calls for 2 cups of milk. I'm going to put almost 2 cups because I'm using honey instead of sugar. I don't want to quite use the full amount of milk because there's going to be more liquid in the recipe that way. So for the cornstarch, it's 3 tablespoons. I'm going to put a little bit more in just for good measure, just to make sure it goes good. And for the cocoa powder, I'm going to put in almost 1/3 cup. I shorted a little bit because this cocoa powder is probably a little bit denser than the stuff you get at the regular supermarket. And then I stop there, and I'm going to start to whisk this up. Just the dry powder. Whoops, see what I mean? I get chocolate powder all over everything because I'm going too fast. And I start to add milk. Now the point of adding the milk is you slowly, is you want to stir it in and add a certain amount. It's hard to say how much. I guess maybe, that's the milliliter side. So about 1/3 cup or so, so that it's not too thick but not too thin. You want to get it to, see, this is going to be too thick. It starts to clump up in the whisk. So I'm adding some more to keep it from doing that. Once it clumps up in the whisk, it's hard to get it back out again. Yeah, see, I've got it. I have to kind of get it loose from there. You know, get a knife and get it out. That's the hazard of trying to stir it without enough milk in it. Hello. And keep going until you get most of the lumps out. It'll might lump up a little bit when you do it that way. Alright, before I put any more milk in, I put the honey in because it's easier to get the honey to mix in. This honey will be a bit slow coming out. And I usually put, I just had to, it still has a little bit of crystallization in this honey. I'm sorry there's a shadow over it, but I'm going to put 2 tablespoons approximately. It's not that critical because I'm going to sweeten additionally with stevia. And it takes the honey a while to come out of the spoon. Some people put butter inside the spoon to keep the honey from sticking as much, but I'm being a bit lazy here, so. Alright, we'll put another one. As I say, it's not that critical. It's not like measuring baking powder or something like that, where if you use the wrong amount, you can have a real disaster on your hands. So I'm overfilling this one a little bit to compensate for how much stays stuck to the spoon. And I stir all that in. Let's try and get some of it out of the spoon that way. I don't know if I can. There we go. Now you notice I had 2 sets of measuring spoons because I want to measure something else later, and then when this gets dirtied, I put it to one side. So now that that's in, I'm going to put a few drops of stevia. Now I kind of just guess on this. I'm going to put 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's about right. And then I'm going to put the rest of the milk in while stirring. I'll put the milk back in the refrigerator too. I won't get too warm. Now, we're going to go over to the microwave. And bring the wooden spoon with us. Now this is a really big microwave and it's 1200 watts, so that's pretty hot and I don't want it to boil over while I'm cooking it. So the rule is 3 minutes, stop and stir, 1 minute, stop and stir, another minute, stop and stir, and that should be enough to have it be fully done. So I use the power level thing and I reduce the power level down to level 8 so that it's not too hot, and I put in the 3 minutes. And I just let it go. And when it first comes after the 3 minutes, it'll just be still very liquidy and just like hot chocolate will look like. But stir it anyway and put it back in. I usually do the second minutes a little more. I just go 1, 1, 1 on the number pad because it's easy. And I keep an eye on it to make sure it doesn't boil over the last time it goes around. So, while it's cooking for the first 3 minutes, if you're going to put walnuts the way I do, this is a good time, while we're waiting for it to go, to chop them up. And I don't want them to be too small. I just don't want them to be the whole ones, because it's a little bit disconcerting to run across a whole walnut while you're eating it. So I just chop them up a little bit. And as I say, they stay fresher when they're whole, and then you chop them just before you're going to mix them into the pudding. Of course, this cutting board is a little small, so I have pieces left over. All right, now we'll go back and finish the cooking. Okay, so the first 3 minutes, you can see, I don't know if you can see close enough here, there's sort of a little bit of a dark ring around the edge. It cooks a little faster near the edge than it does in the beginning. Than it does in the middle at the beginning. But I'm just stirring it all in. And make sure not to drip this stuff on the floor. And I'm going to, again, put the power level down to level 8. And I'm just going to go 1, 1, 1 and start it. And we'll do 1 more minute. So, of course, in most cooking videos, we fib a little bit because we cut out the parts of how long it takes to cook. But in reality, 3 minutes, 1 minute, 1 minute, a little time to stir in between, you're going to be done in less than 10 minutes, pretty much. Alright, so this is after the first 1 minute period. And you can see in here, I don't know if you can get close enough, it's kind of getting thicker. It's still pretty liquidy. But the whole point is, even with a turntable, microwave ovens don't completely uniformly heat things. So now you can see how it's starting to get a little bit thicker. You can see how it's dripping off the spoon. So I think we're going to do pretty well here. I'm going to fix the power level back. Now here's where you have to be careful, because if it's too hot and it runs too long, it can boil right over the top of the rim of the bowl. And first of all, you lose pudding that way, and second of all, you have a big mess to clean up. So you can see in there, if it starts to bubble up and rise up too much, you can stop it ahead of time. And usually it'll bubble up around the edges, because that's where most of the heat gets in. I think we're doing pretty well, though. I can see it starting to rise a little bit. I know what I can do. We can edit that in. Here. Alright, so now I'm going to stir the walnuts in. And again, if you don't want to put nuts, that's fine. You can put other things too. I used to put bananas, but I don't tolerate bananas very well anymore. So, and that might sound weird too, but it actually was quite delicious. And then we put in, it says in the recipe, 2 teaspoons of vanilla. I usually put 1, but here, we'll do it with 2. Vanilla is kind of expensive, so if you want to say vanilla, put 1. A little bit works out pretty well. And stir that in. Now, a skin will form on the top of this as it cools. I happen to like the skin. Some people don't. If you don't like the skin, you get some plastic wrap or wax paper or something and put it down on top of it while it's still hot. It won't cool off as fast that way, but it will keep the skin from forming. Now it has to cool, because you can't eat it this hot. It's still very hot. Now in the wintertime, we have a back porch that's unheated. I just stick it out there, and it's below freezing, so it cools off rather quickly. But instead, we're going to have to put it in the refrigerator. And I don't think I prepared enough space in the refrigerator to do this. So I'm going to have to figure out where I can economize here. So I'm going to rearrange things in here a little bit. Okay. Always be prepared to have somewhere to put it. So I'm going to stick it in the refrigerator and close that up, and it should be ready in about 20 minutes, something like that. So while it's cooling in the refrigerator, I get to lick the spoon. Like that. Now I like to make whipped cream to put on top of it. So I made an interesting discovery that you might want to think about if you want to make whipped cream from scratch, which is what I do from scratch. I use a metal bowl. Now here's a very interesting thing I found out about this bowl. You could use any metal or glass bowl to whip cream in. I, at one point, washed this in the dishwasher. And then when I tried to whip cream in it, the cream would not whip. And it took me a while to figure out that it was having washed it in the dishwasher that made the difference. And the reason was, in the dishwasher, in this one we have, and a lot of them they have, there's a place for something called a rinse agent. And the rinse agent's job is to prevent bubbles and streaks on the dishes. And the way it works is to break all the bubbles that might form from the soap in the dishwasher. Well, the problem is some of the rinse agent stays on the bowl, and it prevents the bubbles from forming that make whipped cream. So I always wash it by hand and rinse it thoroughly before I put it away. Now I'm going to make the bowl cold by sticking it in the freezer And then after it's cooled off, I'll whip it, and I'll just put a little vanilla and a little stevia in it, and I use egg beaters. Do it by hand. And I prefer to do that for two reasons. One, I don't need to use up any electricity, and number two, I get some exercise. My goodness, there's plenty of calories in chocolate pudding, so I'll burn off a few of them before I sit down to eat. Alright, so now I've got the bowl right out of the freezer. It's very cold. I'm putting in the cream, and I don't measure it for some reason. I just kind of put in a certain amount. Here, we'll open this up and get the last couple drops out like that. And I'm going to rinse that out and put it in recycling, because we get to recycle these around here. And I'll put a little bit more just so I have plenty. And I add a teaspoon of vanilla, just to give it a little more flavor. And I only put like 1 or 2 drops of stevia in, because it really is a very powerful sweetener. And I don't want the whipped cream to be too sweet. I like it to have a little bit of tartness to it. I'll put this back. And then the exercise begins. And you see where the bubbles start forming right away, because the bowl is very clean. And this is a good quality cream, so it whips up nicely. Let's see how it looks. Oh, we're getting there. We're getting there. I use it a little bit more, make it really a little bit stiffer. That's another reason I have the apron on. I'm a vigorous egg beater operator here, so sometimes it splashes. I think that's pretty good. That look good to you? Okay. So I want to make it easier to clean. I spin it. Of course, it gets whipped cream in places if it's too high up out of the bowl. A little bit to get some of it off. And then when I want to clean it up, I do this right away. Put some water in the measuring cup. Then I can put the cream, the egg beater right in, and turn it, and it gets all the whipped cream off so it doesn't dry on. Then I can wash it later. So we have a little cleanup to do, but not too much. A couple of measuring spoons, measuring cup, the whisk, and when we're done with the bowls, of course. Okay. There's one thing I've experimented with in the past couple of batches I've made of this pudding. I added a little tiny bit of salt. I forgot to say something about that earlier, but you might give it a try. Very small amount. If you put too much, it ruins it. After a cooling period, you can take it out of the refrigerator. And you can see the skin that's formed on the top. You just break through that with a spoon. This has come out really nicely. And we'll put some whipped cream on top. Like that. I like a lot of whipped cream. And have a taste. I could eat this every night. I shouldn't, but I could. So I'd like to make some more videos in the future, not necessarily about cooking. I have a Patreon account. I'll put the information on the screen right below me. I'd love it if you donate $1 or $2, whatever, help keep me going, pay the bills. Also, I've written a book, which is not a cookbook. It's a memoir. It's called A Man Wearing a Dress. And you can get it at any bookstore. It's about gender identity and some reflections on society and culture and some poetry thrown in for no extra charge. That's my first book, and I'm going to keep creating more videos and more books as I go along. So thanks for watching, and enjoy your chocolate pudding.